Hello and welcome to Mapping the College Audition. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA. That's Musical Theater College Auditions. Check us out at mtca.com. And today we've got Joe Domencic from Seton Hill on the pod. For our newer listeners, it's another one of our college deep dive episodes where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. And as you'll hear in the interview, a particularly special interview for me since Joe was one of my old teachers at the theater school I used to go to in middle school and high school. So we'll talk about Seton Hill, and then we will do a few bonus minutes just talking about secondary education a bit and the value of those early childhood teachers. I'm going to give my usual caveat that when we have one of our more emerging schools, this episode may not be for everyone. We tend to use that word emerging when we're describing both very new programs, like recently we had Texas Women's in their very first year of the BFA, or programs like Seton Hill, which are relatively new. The BFA, I think, started in 2013, Joe said, but now trying to put themselves a bit more on the map. I think it, as you've heard before, it is a really exciting opportunity for a school and a student when you talk about emerging programs, but of course isn't for every student, right? If your goal is all about name brand and the most competitive program you can reach for, this might not be your fit. But as I think our regular listeners to the podcast will gather, we are really believers at MTCA in asking you to think outside of the box in terms of those name brand most competitive programs. Right? For those who are not yet blog subscribers, you can check out my blog on this very subject on our Substack, talking all about the top school lists and what makes a top school, or if you can listen to our holiday podcast on the very same. Again, none of that is to say that we don't believe there's great value in those well-established programs. We absolutely do. But also just that if you're stuck on those programs, if you're thinking about them as a default without really kind of examining why you think they're actually right for you, it's worth doing that examination. And then if you end up back at the idea of saying, nope, for me or for my child, this is absolutely right. I really want the most notoriety, the most professional opportunity, whatever it is that leads you back to one of those most competitive programs, I'm all here for it, right? And then the goal becomes trying to get into one of those programs. We do that with a lot of our students. But if you're earlier in this process, or if you haven't done that kind of investigation for yourself, I think it's really interesting and helpful to check out what some of these emerging programs can offer and investigate whether that might be right for you and where you are in your process and your longer process, not just your college process. So to that end, this episode with Seton Hill, which I hope you really enjoy. On the other hand, I hope you're all really loving your Januaries. We're doing very well here. I am so excited to see so many of our seniors at our upcoming Unifieds in New York City, Chicago, and LA. I'll be in all three cities. I am going to bring my microphone and I'm going to try to grab some good content for all of you who are not going to be there. So if you are a regular listener who's listening to this and you're about to head off to New York City, off to head out to Chicago, LA, and you know you want to be on the pod, please do seek me out. We will do a bunch of those person on the street interviews that we've done before. We'll try to make a cute pod for all of you. It's kind of a nice time capsule of the year, I think. And I do actually think I've heard it's very helpful for those who are going through the process to hear from people who are literally right in it as they speak, or if you're going to do it next year, have just gone through it. So hopefully these become little valuable time capsules for future generations of listeners as well. And speaking of those future generations, there are still 6 days to sign up for our next Meet MTCA workshop, which is January 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's a Tuesday, meaning that this is the last episode that we've dropped where you'll still be able to catch it. If you try to listen next week, you will have missed it by one day. Please sign up at the link at mtca.com. This workshop is a free opportunity to chat with me. You get to chat with Marcus. You're going to meet a bunch of our coaches via video and see some really cool examples of students' work, and hopefully leave this workshop with a better idea of the expectations of this process from an artistic perspective, and hopefully a bit of a game plan for yourself. So if you know you're interested in doing this process and you're a current junior, sophomore, freshman, or the parent of one of those kinds of humans, please do come check us out on January 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, sign up is free at mtca.com. All right, let's get to this interview with the wonderful Joe Domencic from Seton Hill. Well, we are so excited to be joined by Joe Domencic. Joe has a BFA in vocal performance and a BFA in music composition from Carnegie Mellon University, an MM in music technology, electronic composition edition from Duquesne University, and a diploma from the New Actors Workshop. He's worked all over the country, especially in Pittsburgh, with a number of regional theaters. And he's written children's musicals like The Next Galileo and Beyond the Moon. And he's now associate professor of musical theater and theater at Seton Hill University, which is located in Greensburg, PA. They're looking for classes of about 12 to 15 in the acting and MTs. They have a BFA in MT, a BA in MT, a BFA in acting, a BA in theater arts, lots of different degrees we may chat about. And of course, the greatest credit of all for Joe is that he is my former teacher from Act One Theater School in Pittsburgh, where he was an absolute favor of mine. In reaching out to Joe to start this podcast, my wife had found a recommendation letter, which Joe had written me for Carnegie Mellon pre-college when I would have been 15, 16 years old. It was like in a drawer of my childhood home. So that prompted this reach out and was a wonderful way for us to reconnect. Joe, welcome on the pod. How are you feeling today?
Charlie, I can't tell you, this is thrilling for me to be able to talk to you. It's like it was just yesterday that we were in that show together. And we were just talking about before that that production was the area premiere of Mary Zimmerman's amazing play, Metamorphoses. Forget the Pittsburgh public, forget City Theater.
Right.
We did it.
I really appreciate the phrase area premiere. It's like award eligible. I mean, really, everything is an area premiere somewhere, and depending on how you define the area, I think.
We'll say the Western Pennsylvania premiere.
Pennsylvania area premiere of Metamorphoses, Metamorphoses, not Metamorphoses.
That's right. Oh, it has such a special place in my heart. I remember that like it was yesterday.
As do I. It was a special time. Okay, but we could reminisce, and we will do some of that at the end of this podcast for people who want a little bit more sort of childhood theater stuff. We're going to some bonus questions there, but we're really here to chat about Seton Hill, excuse me. Is there anything that you want to throw in terms of your own experience, your journey here? Read that little bit of a bio, but anything in terms of your journey toward your position as it exists now, and then we'll get into Seton Hill a little bit in itself.
Well, sure. It was 2003, right about the time I'd come back from New York after living there for about 5 years, training at the New Actors Workshop, and realizing that I wanted to be back in Pittsburgh. I wanted to be back home. I thought that's where I want to spend the rest of my career, and that felt right for me. And I was starting to get more work back here. And then for a while, I was working as an actor, adjunct professor, music director, a number of different things. And then I started music directing a production in 2003, And the World Goes Round, at Seton Hill. They asked me to teach voice lessons. And honestly, full-time teaching position was not on my radar at that point. But then I had a bit of a transformation where I realized, boy, I really want to do this. This has become really important to me. And then in 2013, when they launched the BFA in musical theater and they opened up another position for it, I applied for that. And I've been here as a full-time professor since then.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about, so that's 2013. I'd love to hear kind of what the expansion of Seton Hill has been. And, both in talking about what it has been for the past decade, but then also kind of looking forward, like, what are the kind of students who come to Seton Hill? I'd love to kind of hear, like, what does it mean to be a Seton Hill student? And, so who has come there? And in terms of if things are shifting and you're making ambition, I know in terms of new recruitment and stuff like that, what do we think that's going to look like?
Well, historically, Seton Hill, because we're liberal arts, because we're a smaller program, we're able to focus, I think, really on the individual. So everybody comes in, they're a little bit different. This person wants a double major in theater business. This person has a really strong interest in the dance portion, so we make sure they're in more dance classes. This person wants to do some writing, so we get them some, they maybe take an English writing minor. So we're able to specialize the education for each student while we lean into the whole liberal arts identity, which is important to us. Because we're smaller, students get a lot of attention. They're part of building a really supportive community that is a little removed from Pittsburgh, but we're close enough that we can go and take advantage of those theaters and those opportunities. I would say that the liberal arts, the community, the smaller focus, and the fact that we're able to individualize the training, those are the hallmarks of who we are. As far as where we're going, I'm assuming the chair position now in spring. And so my shift is focusing, and this is part of it, honestly, it's about letting people know about what we're doing and taking our program, I think, to the next level.
Yep.
Partially in recognition, so that I think people not just in Western Pennsylvania, but beyond will say, "Oh yeah, Seton Hill. Have you
Yep.
checked out Seton Hill?" That's part of my mission going forward.
I love it. That's what we'll spend some time talking about today, of how we're putting it on the map. I'd love to hear a little bit. Just, you mentioned sort of the double major possibility. Do you have a sense in terms of the BFA, especially for the BFA in MT and the BFA in acting, what percentage of credits are they getting that are going to be artistic? Meaning, how much time they're spending in somewhat that's something that's related to theater versus what percentage of time are they spending doing general liberal arts?
If I do the math, I would say the BFA, you're looking at about 100 credits. Our liberal arts is roughly 40 credits, but easily 15 credits, maybe more of those, are covered by our training classes. So let's see, what's that math? 75, 80%.
And a little over, if you count the 15 all toward theater, it's a little
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
So every semester you're taking one or two of our liberal arts core classes.
So then how does that work with people who are trying to double major? Does that mean it's much easier to double major in an artistic field? Do you have people who double major in?
We actually do. Now, it takes a student that's really dedicated, really focused, that's really, there's someone that they do the work, they get it done on time. We have had people double major in theater business and in the BFA in musical theater. It is easier with the BA degree because it's about 20 credits less. And we don't look at our BA in musical theater and our BFA in musical theater as one being better than the other. We just look at them as equal options. The BA allows more flexibility. Yeah. We are more selective with the BFA degree, but we don't see it as something that is necessarily better. It just suits some people better. And some people that may have been accepted into the BFA degree opt for the BA because they want that flexibility.
Yep. And does that mean there's coverage across the classes with BFA MTs, BFA acting, BA? Are they all taking the same classes?
They are. When I'm in a class, like in my acting 4 class here, I have acting majors, I have musical theater BAs, musical theater BFAs. Honestly, Charlie, I'm not even thinking about, oh, you're this track, you're this track. You're just in my acting class and we're working on acting. Same thing if it's a voice lesson, same thing if it's acting the song class. I'm just dealing with them. This is where you are, this is where we're trying to get you. So all classes are open to everybody. And that's another aspect of the way you can personalize the education to suit your specific interests.
Do you feel like for the MTs, is there a discipline that Seton Hill is really focusing on in terms of, are we more music based, more dance based, more acting based, really equal across the three? How do you think of sort of your focus with disciplines?
If you look at just the classes, you would say it's pretty equal as far as how many dance and acting and singing classes you take. We don't require a dance audition to get in. But if somebody shows us that they're a really strong dancer and they want to take advantage of that, they'll be in our upper level dance classes. They could have opportunities to choreograph if they want, if that's important to them. So even though most of our students aren't advanced dancers, if they come in with that, we make sure that they have that opportunity because they're put into the right dance class based on their ability. We have 4 levels of jazz, ballet, and tap, all the usual suspects, plus commercial dance and hip hop and contemporary styles that are built specifically for our BFA dance major degree, which is pretty new, only a few years old, but which also benefits our musical theater majors because they can take advantage of those classes.
I love it. So, and you started doing this a little bit. You mentioned the acting 4. You mentioned a couple different sequences with the curriculum from a dance perspective. I love just is there anything else you want me to know about the curriculum, both in terms of just the basic sequence that especially a BFA MT would take, but then also anything as we talk about, how are we expanding ourselves more on the map? Are there shifts and changes that you're making with taking over this chair position of going, I think we're trying to add this. I think we're trying to, how is the curriculum? And then if there are any shifts that you're making to it, I'd love to hear.
Well, we're in the middle of implementing a program review, which added some things. With the BFA in acting, we've added a film class. We've added a second level of voice and speech where we're getting into more dialects. We've added the upper level dance courses. I expanded my acting the song class into 4 different levels. So we're going from fundamentals through pop and rock, through audition prep, through different characters, character and style. That's one of the classes. So we have more iterations and levels of each of the classes. We've added a junior cabaret, which I'll be doing with the juniors upcoming. And then we already have this piece. This is part of me wanting to take things to the next level. Everyone always asks us, well, what about, do you have a showcase? Mm-hmm. And we don't have a quote unquote showcase. And it's a good question, of course. But what we've been doing, which we're doing even more now, is filming everything. So we're really leaning into the idea of you need to be prepared to present yourself virtually. You have to have a strong website. You need professional reels.
As you
So
talk to me from a professional podcast studio at Seton Hill. So
yeah, the
that's
facilities
great.
here are wonderful. And I'll have to mention the buildings we have downtown too, in our downtown campus, which is where the arts are. So what we're doing is I think we're doing more of this is in our professional practices classes and in all of our performing classes, because we're recording everything and getting students really adept at making self-tapes, getting their websites and reels ready. We already are helping them with that virtual calling card. In a couple of years, maybe as soon as next year, I'm going to present that as our rollout of the class, which will basically be a virtual showcase, that I believe will grow from there. So that's me thinking down the line
I
to
love
help expand our presence.
Well, and then just because I often ask in this way, like, so if that's the showcase of it all, what else are you doing in terms of sort of preparing students for the launch into the business? So in terms of, are they taking the business classes, or how else are they preparing to sort of be ready to meet agents and managers? And eventually, I'd love to kind of hear about what is the current diaspora of Seton Hill students? Are they mostly going to Pittsburgh? Are they mostly coming to New York? How does that work in terms of how they're prepared to work professionally?
Well, certainly in the classes, there's a lot of audition prep. So in my acting the song class, we're always addressing what do you do in the audition room, getting your material ready, getting your book ready, handling that audition, presenting professional reel. We have this career and readiness, what's it called? Career and professional readiness thing on our campus. I forget the name of the
Probably called the career
the department. Yeah,
That's
but
it.
they,
Got it.
but there's lots of interview practice. There's that too. There's writing cover letters. There's presenting yourself professionally online. We have 2 capstone prod classes. One's the professional practices class that is dealing with all of that and getting the students ready with that website. Also, just making a plan. What's your 3 to 5 year plan? Some of them do want to go to New York and make plans to do that. A lot of them say, I'm sticking around regionally. I'm going to explore theaters in Pittsburgh, save up some money, go to New York in a year. Some go to Chicago. We have a couple of students that prepare for graduate schools. So I had a student that was a musical theater major that is now studying in London for her graduate degree. I have another student that went to CMU for the arts administration and is now working in administration.
Yeah.
So we think what our degree does really well is it provides students with a lot of flexibility without sacrificing strong training.
Yeah. That's so well said. And I really love the idea of like making a plan senior year, because I think that is sometimes missing, especially from schools where it's like, we're doing a showcase. And so it's sort of, you default to the plan is, well, I'm going to New York and they'll tell me if I'm good or not. And you're like, well, that's not quite what a showcase is. It's not quite like, it's not the only plan to like move to New York immediately and then immediately start working on Broadway. Like for some people that happens, but other people they go, well, what is my avenue in? How do I need to grow from 22 to 24 before I'm ready to move to a big city if I'm not from a big city? And, so some of those things I think just can kind of get skated over if you're thinking, if everything is focused toward a showcase, to be like, what is my actual plan as a human? What do I need at 22 years old?
So in that way, I think we have a distinct advantage in the long game, because in our dedication to the liberal arts, in having a program that really educates people as theater artists. So you're working backstage, you're developing other skills. You can work in the box office if you want. You take on a minor or a double major. You don't have to leave any part of yourself behind as you work on this thing that you're really concentrating on. We think that's a great advantage to an artist and a person. And as somebody that came from conservatory training, I went to CMU and I went to the New Actors Workshop and then back to Duquesne. I've become a real convert to the liberal arts.
Well, you
approach.
almost created you have so many specialties that you've almost created a liberal. You have vocal performance, music composition, music technology. So you've sort of pieced them together to make a liberal arts for yourself.
I couldn't give up any one of them. I guess that's what it is. And so, maybe I was always a liberal arts person and now it's just, that's why I feel so at home here.
Well, tell me a little about the liberal arts. So you mentioned the possibility for double major. What does the experience of Seton Hill, I'd love to hear both from a kind of campus perspective, and you mentioned facilities of like what the experience of being a student on campus is, but then also if I'm interested in just the broader university, what does that look like at Seton Hill?
Well, we have this wonderful historic campus up on what they call the Hill, the 200 wooded acres. It was over 100 years old. It's really traditional feel. People say it looks like Hogwarts, ascending this beautiful tree line to drive. And then downtown, and to me, this is evidence of how committed this university is to the arts. We have our arts campus with these two relatively new buildings built in the last one 15 years ago and then one not too many years after, the Performing Arts Center in the heart of Greensburg, and then the Arts Building, which has our fine arts and dance classes. So what our students do is they'll be downtown training in our classes, and they take the shuttle. We have a couple of shuttles that run up and down. They could walk in the good weather if they want, or drive if they have a car. And then they're up usually on the hill taking those one or two liberal arts classes or going back to the residence halls. There are over 80 clubs. We have our Student Theater Activities Council. So outside of what they're doing with our classes and then maybe being in a show, working the show at night or rehearsing, they might be involved in one of those clubs or going to a sporting event. We have all these Division II sporting, whether it's lacrosse or equestrian or football.
If I'm
There's a lot of
among
activities.
people out there who don't know what Greensburg, Pennsylvania is, how would you sort of describe the experience? That would you describe as suburban, exurban, rural? How would you sort of describe it?
It's this really charming small town that I guess, we're not, it's not really rural because it's a little town, but if you go 5 minutes out, you could find what feels like rural Pennsylvania. And then yet we're only 35 miles from Pittsburgh. So 45-minute drive to Pittsburgh. Greensburg is the county seat of Westmoreland County. Beautiful coffee shops. We're right next door to the train. We're down the block from the Palace, which brings in all of these touring acts, home of the Westmoreland Symphonic Orchestra. So there's a lot of art and culture in Greensburg itself. And then if you want to go to the mid-size town of Pittsburgh, you can drive there, and our students are going there all the time. We go there as a part of classes, but then they go there otherwise as well.
And then what percentage of students live on campus, live off campus? How many are commuting from, I guess I'd love to hear both that, and then also in terms of the current recruitment, what percentage of people are from the area versus how many are coming in from a couple hours away or from all over the country?
I don't have an exact percentage on that, but I will say that most of our students currently are coming to us from 100-mile radius. A lot of them are going to be local. We get a lot, but then if you go out to Maryland, West Virginia, the middle of PA, then we get more there.
Yep.
But we've had people as far away as Australia that came specifically for the theater and lacrosse combination. So we have a student right now, a wonderful student from Nebraska. So that reach, I think, is expanding, although definitely currently most of them are local, but most of them are residents.
Yeah,
we have some commuters, but I would say this is a really rough guess, so don't quote me, but I'm going to guess that it's 15% commuters. Most of them decide to live on campus.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll talk a little bit in the second half about sort of your recruitment efforts. Because this was your first year at Pittsburgh Unifieds, or were you there last year too?
No, this was our first year.
Yeah. So in terms of expanding and seeing more people from all over the country, and we'll talk about that in a second. But one of the things I think you mentioned in our brief, I forgot to say that regular listeners will have heard 5 minutes of you and the rushed, frenetic 5-minute showcase date that we all did at the Pittsburgh Unifieds, if they're caught that episode of the pod. But one of the things you talked about was cost. I remember you memorably saying, and we were one of the many people at Weekend who were saying, please negotiate down. We'll talk about cost. But it looks like the tuition we found was about $43,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about what are the ways that we can make that negotiation happen? Is it mostly academic? Is it mostly need-based? Is it artistic merit? Is it from, going and bartering with you behind the table? How does it work to sort of bring that tuition down?
Yeah, you don't have to be, it's not like working with a used car salesman or anything. So it's not that hard.
It'd be a pushover. I think I could extract money out of you if I was behind the table.
You could, absolutely. But thankfully, I don't feel like I have to do that. So what you do is when you apply, you immediately qualify for a merit scholarship, 18 to 28,000. Most of those are in the 20s. If you're a great student, you're going to see that closer to 28 or at 28,000. So immediately think that's your discount. So you're looking at probably half or more than half off of your tuition.
Yeah.
Then you get a separate visual and performing arts scholarship up to $4,000 a year. So you add that into the mix. If you're a really good student and want to apply for the honors program and you're accepted into that, another $2,500. And then there's some other little scholarships. If you're coming from a Catholic university, you're eligible for a couple thousand a year. If you've been a wonderful example of service, and you have this great history of service in high school. We have this special service scholarship. So there are different scholarships you can add on to that, and that's not counting then the aid you would get from FAFSA. So immediately from your audition, most students are going to be spending less than half, maybe well under half. They say that it ends up being about the price of a state school, and when I do the math, that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And I think it's a great and relatively typical scholarship answer in terms of just people understanding the ways that money come, and specifically the percentages coming more from academics. I think makes a lot of sense. It's all really great. One thing.
And then my other question is, once we have had people that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've had people that were on the fence with us. They really wanted to come to us, but another school was giving them a little more. We advocated for them. We bumped up the visual and performing arts scholarship a little bit, and that made the difference.
I love that. And one thing you mentioned, which I neglected to ask you earlier on, was just that idea of being a Catholic university. How does that affect the theater program at all? I mean, is there a large percentage of the student population outside of the theater program Catholic? Are a large percentage of the students Catholic? Or I guess, how does that affect the sort of educational mindset of Seton Hill?
The big thing that it does is I think it just roots our university in this idea of service, of using whatever your gifts are to serve the world. There's no sense of you need to be Catholic, you need to be a particular religion. In fact, the whole part of the Catholic identity, and I welcome people that are thinking about Seton Hill to look at our website, is the idea of embracing other faiths, learning from other faiths. You are required to take a theology class of your choosing, whether that's Christianity or the Jewish scriptures or Islam or some other aspect. That'll be one class, one part of the liberal arts core. But I think most of the students are not Catholic. It's not like it's not a part of the admission. It certainly wasn't a part of my being hired here. But I think what it does, when I look at the school and I look at the history of it, what I've learned over time is how much the spirit of the founders of this school, the Sisters of Charity, their dedication to just serving students, educating them, and then serving the whole community, transforming the world by really empowering students with great education and skills. To me, that's the real legacy that lives on from them. And that's a big part of who we are. To me, that's what it means, the Catholic identity.
That's great. And boy, is that a helpful foundation as an artist, if you can think of yourself as being of service, whether it's of service to the play, to your castmates. I mean, it's such a good thing to be able to have that mindset.
Charlie, I don't know about you, but we're in this world where we're always and acting training does this too. It's so easy to be looking in the mirror all the time. I do think there's something about theater training that can too much. It can encourage vanity or looking here, and that's important to an extent to be able to look at how you come across. But the more we can look at our art as a way of giving to others, changing the world, doing good, to me, that's crucial. And that's what sustains us through it. Because then we're really doing something for a better reason.
It's so true. I mean, yeah, you say everything in balance. I think it's so right. I mean, so often I'm giving the audition advice, sort of audition technique advice of like finding your curiosity in the people behind the table, partially to stop you from being so hyper-focused on yourself, because your nerves are going to do that. Of course, you can't be oblivious to yourself either. You couldn't only be interested in the people behind the table, but most people in the balance need to find a little bit more, how do I find curiosity with this other person, as opposed to how did I sound? What do I look like? We tend to go to that place, especially when we're nervous.
Yeah, that's a focus in my training, whether it's in the acting, the song classes. You've got gifts. And nobody has your combination of gifts. We want to capitalize on those and trust that you have something to give.
Yeah.
You've got to walk in there. And then if you can honestly do that and say, I'm going to give something to these people today. I'm going to share something.
Yes.
It's such a wonderful experience.
How you find the joy in that process. But we're getting to the second half of it, which we'll talk about the additional where I jumped ahead. That was my jump. I just want to wrap with the ambitions. You mentioned some of the growth from 2003 to 2013. I'd love to kind of hear what's 2025 to 2035. 10 years from now, what is the goal for kind of where Seton Hill will be? And then if you want to give us any of, you don't have to give us all of your secret sauce, but how do you see yourself getting there? What are some of the steps? And I know we'll get into some recruitment stuff, but sort of how do you see if you go, our goal is to be even more on the map. I want people to in New York be going, hey, Seton Hill, that's an amazing program. Like, how do you see yourself getting there? And is that the goal? What are those goals, and how do we see ourselves getting there 10 years from now?
I think part of it will happen just by virtue of who we are, because I think the value of a liberal arts degree in this day and age is being appreciated more and more because of the flexibility it gives an artist. I think that for me, it's this leaning into a virtual presence that I hope that definitely before 10 years will reach out into more live showcases of our work and our students, so that we have higher profile graduates, frankly. I think going with the industry's emphasis on video and film, we've already expanded our classes. So we have film classes and we're incorporating filming into all of our classes.
Yep.
I think expanding in that direction is important. I think building on the entrepreneurship, which is already a part of who we are, so that students, whether they're going into arts administration or whether they want to found their own theater or they want to go into teaching, we're already doing that in a lot of ways. I think we can do it in a way that is even more empowering for each of those different paths.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And boy, that idea of being an entrepreneur, whether you end up still just being a professional actor, but the level of entrepreneurship that's needed in that, and also just how many people, by the time, I'm hitting my 40s, and by the time so many people are in that place, there is a spirit of self-starting entrepreneurship. Even if you're on your fourth Broadway show and you're doing all this amazing stuff, that you go, I'm probably going to start a flower business at some point. I'm probably going to do something. People do other things. I mean, one of our friends just started an auctioneer's business. He's being an auctioneer as well as a professional actor. So cool. Like, what a cool skill set to have. And you likely are going to have to do something like that in your life, not just acting that, is going to sustain it all.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, part of our philosophy is you are more than an acting, singing, dancing machine. You're a person. You've got thoughts. You've got a brain. You've got all of these different interests and things you want to say. So not only does our program and the whole liberal arts allow you to develop your whole person, but it allows you then to pivot if need be. I mean, I look at some of the people I admire so much. Look at Steve Martin. Is he just an actor? Is he just a banjo player? Is he just a composer? Is he just a playwright? No, he's using all of those skills.
Yeah.
That's something that our school offers.
Yeah.
Is that kind of, you are an artist.
Yeah.
And you get to manifest that in different ways.
A great place to take a break. We'll take a break, and on the back end, we'll talk a little bit more about the audition admission process for Seton Hill. So we're back in a flash. All right, we are back with Joe Domencic, and we're going to chat about the audition admission process. So first, it's kind of, you mentioned a little bit already kind of the ethos of a Seton Hill student. I guess I'd love to say, as you're auditioning students, what are you looking for? What, when you go to a PUA where I saw you, or when you're doing these on-campus auditions, what is the experience that makes you go, hey, this person feels like they might be right for us? I want to hear from a talent perspective, from a personality perspective, but what is it that you're looking for that makes you go, this is going in the yes pile?
Well, from a talent perspective, in that audition, I'm looking for somebody that is willing to live in that material. That they can relax into the moment. They can bring themselves to the work, which I think is important. They look like this is. They look that if they're not at home on stage, they look like they could be at home on stage.
Uh-huh.
There's something in them. When we talk to them, which we always like to do afterwards, and if we have a chance to work with them in person, we want somebody that will engage with us, try something different, that is comfortable communicating, whatever their dreams are, talking about the role. We love people that are curious, that are interested in whatever they're interested in.
Yeah.
So somebody that can be real with us, somebody that is willing to explore their interests in a liberal arts setting, that they can take direction. There's always that, certainly. We always try to work with them in the room, and if they take to that and can enjoy that, that's always something that perks up my interest.
I love it. And can you talk to me about the different ways? So basically, whether, from on-campus auditions, are there virtual options? Are there other places like Pittsburgh Unifieds where you're going to go to regional auditions? So how does that work? What are the different ways I could see or be seen by Seton Hill?
Obviously, there's the Pittsburgh Unifieds, which we did. We've encountered a lot of virtual auditions this year, more so than ever. It's been an option before, but maybe just because of our recruitment efforts through admissions and through our own department efforts, we're getting a lot more requests for that. So people can complete their entire audition online. They submit.
Online means on Zoom or on sending a video in?
Sending in a video, but then we follow it up with an interview.
Yep.
15-minute interview, which can be done. That part we do on Zoom.
Yep.
So a lot of them are virtual that way, but then we have our audition days. We had a couple this in the fall. We have a few more in the spring.
Yep.
But then there's sometimes people that say, I can't make any of those audition days. I really want to come in person. And we've worked around that too. And we've said, okay, come on in. You can sit in on classes. We'll also work out your audition time. We'll get that all taken care of.
Yep.
So whether it's submitting videos, going to that unified, or one of our audition days, or then even working on a particular day, if none of those happen to work, there are a lot of ways.
I love that. And do you have a sense in terms of, your ability? Let's say you see someone at Pittsburgh Unified, you know nothing about their academics. You go, I love them, I want them, but they haven't yet applied to the school. How much percentage of the admission is about the artistic versus how much academics? Like, how much sway do you have to go, we really love this person, versus do they have to meet an academic standard? Do you have a sense of what that academic standard is?
The academic standard is, I think it's like a 2.5 or above the GPA roughly. So if somebody's on the bubble there,
yep,
then our advocacy can push them over the line.
Yep.
Most of our students are not there. Most of our students are, 3 above, 4.0. With all these weighted courses, sometimes
yep,
we get a lot of people that are higher than a 4.0.
Weighted courses with the new grade inflation, not even new, but increasing grade inflation where nobody gets a 2.5. You could be failing your class and you have a 3.0 somehow.
Exactly. So there is in the initial, they have to be accepted academically. And we really have nothing to do with that part. They are accepted academically, and the merit scholarship is based on that.
Yep.
And then we have our audition. It's rare, Charlie, that we've had to say to people, sorry, you can't be accepted academically, just because of the students that are applying. They pass that academic bar, and the only thing that seems to change is the amount of that merit scholarship based on that.
Based on that. And do you interact with any part of the academic application? Do you read the essays? Do you look at their grades and SATs? Is any part of that, or you look at their letters of rec, I should ask, given that you wrote me one?
I do.
You do, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I look through that because to me that says a lot. If somebody's written an essay, if somebody wants to talk about this other interest they have or this other creative outlet they've had, that tells me more about the person. So I take advantage of whatever they've submitted to tell me more about that person.
And yeah, what are you looking for in that? I mean, are you looking at that after you viewed the audition and you're just, this is a tiebreaker for you? I guess what are you looking at it before you're going to meet the person in an on-campus audition? How do you use those for yourself as a tool?
A lot of times I use it if they've submitted videos, I use it as a way to talk about their interests because I've learned more about them. I can say, oh, I love that thing you said in the essay about this, or I see you're really interested in this club at school, or so you want to do playwriting. You can explore that in our school. You could write a play as a final senior project. We've had students do that. So I use it as a way to see how well what Seton Hill is matches their interests, and we can use that as a thing to talk about.
Yep.
And then also it's something that I guess it helps fill out the picture sometimes where I feel like I understand someone better and I can say, oh my gosh, you have all these different interests. You don't want to be tied down to one thing. You're such a perfect liberal arts student. All these things you're talking about are core to our mission about honoring the dignity and uniqueness of every individual and you want to be a part of building a community. You really need to check out Seton Hill.
Yeah.
So there are things that allow me to, talk more about that.
I love it. A bonus question I've been asking more and more students, or more and more schools, I should say, in the post U Arts world. I don't know if you followed, like the U Arts was a school that closed due to financial issues. And we're seeing more schools this year also that are having financial troubles sort of on their end. Most of which, when that's historically been true, we always would tell students, well, don't worry about that. That's for them to deal with. You deal with you showing up at school. But I think parents are more and more nervous about it, given that there was a school that really did close midway through a kid's education. How does Seton Hill look in terms of the financial sort of security? If you know those answers of sort of how do you guys feel from a perspective of, I know that you'll be around 4 years from now?
Well, because we're given this report every year as faculty, and it's not that I'm involved in the ins and outs of all those financial decisions, I feel very good because we're in a really good place financially.
Yep.
They're actually building an entire new athletic facility, so there's no shrinking back.
Yep.
And the books are balanced.
Yep.
They're very fiscally responsible here. And honestly, one of the things they do is they say, let's make sure that every dollar is used well. Yep. So every faculty member is in on trying to make sure that we're on good, sound financial footing. So I don't really have any concerns about that.
I love it. All right. Well, let's do some bonus ones then, because I'm dying to do some Act 1 topics. You mentioned, which I didn't realize, that your brother and his wife are now running our beloved Act 1 theater school.
Yep.
I guess I'll start you off by saying, I wonder if you could speak broadly toward your experience now working at the college level. What is the experience? What did you learn from working with middle and high school students, I guess, and how is it different? How is your experience different working at an Act 1 kind of school? And I really, of course, specific to Act 1, but I want to talk about it for our listeners, many of whom have their own versions of Act 1 out there, of a middle school or high school that they theater program where they fell in love with it. Sort of, what is the difference between working with that age group versus this age group to you?
Well, Act 1, as I guess the listeners know, is was second grade through 12th grade. So that's secondary education. And for me, because of Karen Cordaro, the founder's vision, who, by the way, is a Seton Hill graduate. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that.
She graduated from Seton.
I should have had it first at the podcast. The founder of MTCA, founder of Act 1. Excuse me.
That's right. This was before they had a theater department. She was an English major.
Uh-huh.
And then in true Setonian fashion, she was an entrepreneur and founded her own theater school that has affected hundreds, thousands of students. Some have gone into Broadway and film and been doctors and lawyers. So it's that whole idea that theater education is good for anybody, regardless of where they take it. Yep. One of the wonderful things for me at Act 1, and I think this was a part of what the students experienced too, was that you got to try out a lot of different things. So I was an acting teacher. I was an arranger. I was a composer. I was, obviously I was playing piano and music directing. I got a chance to direct, talking about Metamorphoses early. So it was a chance where you could really cut your teeth.
Yep.
And I cut my teeth as a teacher. I learned so much working as a teacher. Now, the difference for me between that, of course, second grade in high school, that's a big difference. Sure. When I'm working with the really young ones, my whole approach is I want them playing. I don't want them in their heads. I want them playing in their imaginative space. Yeah. They don't have to think too much about technique as far as I'm concerned. If they can get up there and jump into the character, they're still learning staples about what it means in acting. But once we get into high school, then you're starting to get into more of understanding what you might learn in a class where you're using, whether it's Sanford Meisner or Uta Hagen or Strasberg, those kinds of techniques that were developed, or improvisation, the fundamentals of improvisation. So we're getting more into that. And then the nice thing about a college level for me is yes, they're young adults, but they are adults. And there's a certain autonomy that I can understand them to have, and a certain freedom that they have. And it's not that we don't respect all of the ages, but it's like, okay, this is, I'm giving you everything I've got. I'm giving you my tools. I'm really invested in what you have to offer. But there's also a sense of, now you have to take it and run with it.
Yeah.
And when students do, that's the best feeling. That's the best feeling.
So well said. And I'm going to wrap you here in a second with some advice to parents, but I'll say, in my experience as a parent myself, I now have a 4-year-old who is never going to be an actor, we'll say. I'm calling it now, though, of course, that means but just sort of seeing a little bit of the, trajectory of that. She's taken dance class and some music classes and just beginning, there's this experience of, like, to your point of, you want them to play, you want them to figure out their bodies and understand some aspect of, like, there's this thing that, when every person tells me, oh, you run MTCA, or my kid wants to be an actor, he'll be great. He's super dramatic. He's like an 8-year-old or whatever. There's some foundational sort of bridge that I think the Act Ones of the world have been able to make between, like, what it is to get on stage and perform and enjoy that, and then beginning to lay some of these foundations of, like, it's like almost like pre-professional. I remember having one of those classes where like a fellow student was like, well, that monologue, no, I don't like what Charlie's doing. He doesn't seem like he's acting. Like, it doesn't seem good. And this wonderful teacher, I won't remember the teacher's name, but who went, no, he's onto something. Keep going. Like, keep doing that idea of, like, you don't need to be performative, and that's good. And I was 15 or something at the time. But I was like, if I hadn't had that moment, I don't know that I would have been like, oh, this is, I felt like that was right, and I was onto something, and somebody helped inspire me to go toward that place where then I was going to go to Carnegie Mellon and go to and get some of the more professional training. But there's some of that intermediate value of, like, some place that's going to lay some of that foundation. And I guess I'm maybe speaking toward it because I think about, so I meet so many students when they're ready for, like, taking me to the professional level, and I go, man, there is something beautiful about that first, you getting to be that first laying a foundation of, like, what is acting? What is good acting? What is good art? You're sort of helping them establish taste or something. I don't know. Maybe.
And I think that has to continue through college. One of the things that we do here at Seton Hill, because we're a smaller school, is that we're able to give a particular student the attention that say, okay, you need to be more you, or you need to step on stage with a certain kind of authority that you have, or take this thing that you're doing in this dance class and now put it into this. Or if you can express yourself through song the way you're doing through speech, then you're set. There's a way of identifying when teachers are really honed in on a particular student, what that thing that they need.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, like, just like you said it so well. It can make all the difference.
Oh, it's because there's so many people always want the tips and tricks. They want just tell me how to do, what's the professional way to put it? What's the shellacking that you're putting on top? And so often it's not, so often it is about, okay, for you internally at that base level, what do you need? Which is not necessarily about what you saw on the YouTube video or what you expect the product is going to be. There is that thing of, like, you at 18, you at 21, whatever level you're at, what do you actually need? Man, if you can find teachers who can do that for you, it's so huge. It's foundational. Can we wrap with any advice for the parents in this process? So, we have many parent listeners as you get to experience, and I'm sure they're part of your recruitment process too, and you're talking with them. What advice would you have for parents in terms of, the looking at the landscape of these programs and just going through this process with their kids?
Well, I imagine that it's very stressful. It seems like it's become such an industry almost. And it's so good that you're helping them through this with this information and getting to know different schools. I guess my advice would be is that I guess you can relax. I don't know. I just want to say to them, look, it's going to be okay. This isn't this one decision. I get it. I get that it's a big decision. I understand that, but they're going to be who they're going to be.
Yeah.
And there's always room for a course correction. If you go to a school, and hopefully when you go to a school and you're actually there in person, you get a sense, I think this feels like home to me. I think this feels like where I belong, where I'm really going to be able to grow. And that's what I do think you find that once you actually visit a place and once you've narrowed it down. I imagine that's one of the final steps in the whole process that you help them go through. So I think that's important. But even so, let's say it doesn't work out. Well, then you'll change course.
Yeah,
and it won't be the end of the world.
Ain't that the truth? I think in the same way we talk about that balance of how much introspection versus, how much you're curious about the outside of yourself. I do think it's one of the ways this, I've been doing this now almost 20 years. I mean, it's one of the ways it has changed in that I think at times people weren't anxious enough at first. They were unrealistic thinking like, oh, I'll do Carnegie Mellon and Juilliard. I'll get into a school or two. And it's hard, it's competitive. And now more come in tightly wound. And actually where I would go, you would benefit from relaxing a little bit. Like, you do need to go through the process. It is a complicated process if you're doing, a lot of schools and you want to have balance in your list and all those things. But more often than not, from a holistic perspective, I would say that is good advice to go. It's going to be okay. I'm trying to tell myself that, Joe, because I am my kid is currently doing the New York City kindergarten process, which is unbelievable. There's been auditions. She experienced her first pre-screen rejection. She had a gifted and talented interview where she did not meet the bar, even though my child's a genius. I don't know what's wrong with their bar, but like the whole thing. And we have 18 schools on the list, and I'm trying to give that advice to myself to go, Charlie, it is going to be fine. She's going to get into a kindergarten. It's going to be okay.
Charlie, it's my brother Paul went through that. Paul and Taifa, because they live in New York and their kids were growing up there. And I remember my wife before for a year or two, she was teaching second grade, and I think she'd given a student a B or something. And I remember she told me how the teacher came in. How's this going to affect my kid's chances of getting into Harvard? I mean, okay.
I have for years, and probably getting my comeuppance because I've mocked our parents, and then I'm going through this experience and going, what is wrong with it? You said no? You can't say no to my child. How dare you? I absolutely dare you.
You didn't? Yeah. Oh no. I've done it too. Our daughter's 10, so I have to watch myself too and say, wait a second, it's okay that somebody else got picked to do this or that.
It's such, it's like nothing in life is binary, of course, right? Relax can't mean, okay, well, just don't think about it and don't do any of it. You still have to do some of the stuff, but can you find some ease and knowing, what's the end of the world? What's the
I know, and I wouldn't want to say relax. I wouldn't want that to seem at all like condescending. I don't mean that at all. I just know because I empathize with you.
Yes.
Boy, what you have to go through, it seems, but I do, being on this side of things and knowing how, it's just like being in an audition room.
Yes.
We're there wanting the students. We're rooting for the students. Yeah. We're looking for the potential.
Yeah.
You don't have to come in. It's certainly from our perspective. We're not expecting a polished professional. That's why you're going to school. That's what we're looking for, is someone that wants to go and train and learn and all that stuff that you should be doing in college.
I love it. All right. Well, if people want more information on Seton Hill, where would you urge them? We want social media, we want websites, we want them emailing you directly. What's the best way for someone, if they want to get a little bit more after spending an hour with us on the podcast, if they want more, where should they head?
Well, they should definitely check out the setonhill.edu. Just go to the website, Google Seton Hill, make sure it's Hill.
Hill, not Hall. I did it. I said Seton Hall. There's a Seton
Well, it's easy to make that mistake. Seton Hill University. You can certainly email me directly if you want at Domencic@setonhill.edu. I'd be happy to answer any emails. But I think that's the easiest way. Check out the website, and then you'll find all kind of links to other things as well.
Sounds great. Joe, thanks so much for the time today. It was such a pleasure.
Charlie, it's just a thrill to talk to you. I can't thank you enough.
Yes. So fun for me to get to do that particular interview. I hope it was as enjoyable for all of you as it was for me and Joe. I have a couple quick hitter takeaways and then basically 2 longer ones. So we'll see how we do. We've talked about it before with the creativity needed for schools when they're with their showcases, or I sometimes talk about how do you launch your students into the industry, because not every school has a showcase, a live showcase. So whatever that creativity is, especially when you don't have the established reputation of one of those quote unquote top schools. I really like Joe's honesty and what they are able to provide now via video, and then the goals of what could be established in a live showcase eventually. I do think you've been able to hear a number of different examples, if you're a regular listener of the show, of what some of that creativity can look like when it's not just a bus to New York City and a showcase, which, you can kind of hear the downside. Some of these showcases may not be attended by the people that you really care about or that you really want to be there, especially in a world where so much now exists digitally, with casting people and representation having the ability, I think, to be a bit lazier than they used to have to be. Sadly, with there being so many excellent schools, with so many different training programs, and then also these digital options, some of those industry people can be a bit lazier and just kind of let the talent come to them, which just, of course, on our end means that you have to find even more creative ways to get across their desk and into those actual rooms. But I also really love Joe's talk. We talk about the creativity. It's not just creativity with the showcase. He's talking about creativity and entrepreneurship in the different paths of Seton Hill graduates, right? We've talked about this before in the idea of the transferable skills of a BFA, which, as listeners, I deeply believe in this idea of the transferable skills in the BFA. Often we talk about that in terms of a backup plan. But I think it's worth talking about even just this idea of like having that path talk as a distinct talk as you're graduating college, right? We're spending all this time with 17, 18-year-olds, sometimes 16, 19-year-olds, but I always say 17, 18-year-olds. We're aiming, your arrow at the industry, and we're aiming that arrow at the most difficult and competitive part of the industry, which is assuming that you might be trying to make a life as a professional actor, right? That's the hardest thing. And so that's what we have to pull the most taut part of the bowstring or whatever, right? But I do think as you round the corner into 22 or whatever you are as you near the end of college, it's worth actively having that conversation with yourself as well. Am I going to pursue this path directly? Am I going to do it immediately? And in what way am I going to pursue it if I'm going to actually pursue it? Like, what city am I going to go to? Or what is my path? Or how am I going to actually do that? I think if you don't ask those questions of yourselves, like thoughtfully and taking a second to really do it, you might just sort of default to taking the proverbial bus to New York City. And while I think that's not a bad default, if you're talking about musical theater hopefuls, with New York City still the capital of the musical theater world, it's not the only option for a young person starting out to necessarily go to New York City. If you've just showcased and you have a fancy agent and some big auditions, by all means, it makes sense. Head to New York City. That's where a lot of the auditions are going to be. It makes a lot of sense, right? But many students graduate from college and are not immediately in that place where they have all of those things. A big agent they're really excited about, some really exciting professional opportunities. They know they want to be in New York City. They have a support network, right? So for those who don't have all that, what is the path for you and what's the plan, right? You know how I love sports analogies on the podcast. I haven't made one in a while, so here we go. I do think that in this way, getting a BFA is a bit like playing competitive D1 sports in college, right? It means you're saying, I am at an elite pre-professional level to be doing this, to be getting a professional training. I should be at this D1, D2 level where I've really showcased an ability, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make it to the NBA or even necessarily pursue the NBA directly, right? And plenty of people who play for D1 schools might realize as they're graduating, I'm okay with shifting paths at 22. Maybe they still love the sport, but they're going to parlay that into coaching, or they're going to get some additional certification and do some kind of physical training, or they're going to try to become a shooting coach or whatever it is, right? Or maybe I'm not done playing yet, but I'm not going to try to go directly to the MTCA. I like to call it the NBA MTCA. I'm not going to go directly to the NBA, but maybe I'm going to play overseas for a while, right? Before I maybe try to come and play stateside. Again, whether that's because I'm going to play in the NBA or I'm going to go for the G League or all the other options you might have from basketball perspective. These analogies, of course, aren't perfect, but I think it is helpful in that what I'm saying is there should be a conscious choice to go, first, am I still in that same passionate place I was at 17, 18? And do I want to actively pursue performing? And if so, what does me pursuing this actually look like in 2030, if that's when you're graduating school, as I graduate from this school in this city? Like, what does it actually mean for me to enter the business, right? Of course, you're only ever going to be able to see so far in your individual path, maybe only a few months down the line. But to really take that second to kind of start from where you actually are and try to chart it out a little bit, I think is helpful, right? How are the finances going to work for me? Do I need to save up some money first? What is my support system? I mentioned that idea in New York City. Do I have a support system, and do I know where I'm going to live and who I'm going to live with and who my friends are going to be? Am I going to be all alone in this new city, right? And how does this thing actualize for me? How do I actually make this pursuit of the path happen if I want to, right? That's where I think having the support of that individualization with mentorship, as well as some of the entrepreneurship that Joe was talking about, can really come in handy. And a lot of your college professors will serve as that kind of mentor for you, right? But you've got to write your own individual story in the vast majority of cases, right? As you'll hear with some of our successful artist guests, there is that portion of people, I should say, where they hit the ground running after showcase. And those first few steps happen primarily with other people pulling the strings, meaning like the agent and the manager setting the thing up for you, and you're really just going, sure, I'll follow that path, right? But I would say that is the minority of cases where that's happening. Most people do have to do some self-charting and some grinding and some setting up some stuff and their own version of EPAs and that entrepreneurship of, I am the CEO of my own company. What am I going to do to figure out how they're going to chart that path to success? Okay, that was one of the longer hitters. Let's do another one of the quick hitters, which was just to talk a little bit about that idea of Catholic schools. We've had a few schools that really do emphasize religion to some extent on the podcast, right? To varying degrees. I think BYU being an example of one where you heard, this is certainly religion is a big part of a lot of our students. And then you're going to hear a range of schools all the way down to very little, even if they have some religious affiliation, like what you're talking about with Seton Hill, where Joe really didn't emphasize it or say it was a big part of the process. I will just say, from a mea culpa perspective, I don't always remember to ask all of the schools. I'm not always even aware of like, oh, right, that is a Catholic school. I didn't even think about that school or that name, or if it's not something that's a big part of it, I don't always ask the question I just did with Seton Hill. I mean, partially it's because Joe did bring it up, right? Whereas some of you might know that if something is on your mind, you might say, well, you didn't mention that school X is a Catholic school or whatever, and I didn't even remember to check on it. So I would just say, well, no, I don't always catch those things and ask that question. And I bring this up as a takeaway, not because I have any wisdom to offer. I think I've said before, and our regular listeners will know, I'm agnostic myself. I'm culturally half Jewish and half Catholic, but I was not raised in any religion. But I say, as a parent, I am personally really interested in that question of like how students and parents are thinking about attending universities that might have these religious underpinnings if they themselves are not part of that religion. I know it is something Elizabeth and I are considering with some of the 20 plus schools that we're talking about applying for kindergarten. It's unbelievable, but it doesn't make me particularly uncomfortable. I think I wouldn't want Solvay to be actively instructed in a particular religion that we didn't practice. That would make me think a little uncomfortable. But I think when you talk about the structure of what some of these schools offer in terms of at least the schools that we're seeing in New York City, it's really interesting, right? Maybe for me, especially since that kind of religious foundation is not something that necessarily I will be offering her directly. It's kind of nice to be exposed to some of the religious concepts, at least for me, some of the ideas of what the underpinnings of religion might be, especially again, for me, in the case of New York City schools, which are going to have what Joe talks about, a pretty all faiths are welcome here approach. It's going to be kind of Unitarian. It's not going to feel like you're going to be instructed in a particular religion, as they say with Seton Hill. But I really am not sure that we're going to end up doing that. Maybe I'll check back in and let you know, certainly as we make our decision of where we ended up, if we do decide on a religious option. But it just made me think about it a little bit. And, even that idea of like, if you're going to do something like that, that might counter your own experience, does it make more sense at the college level? Maybe once you've established a bit more of that foundational personality, or maybe it doesn't matter at all to people, but maybe it would also feel like, oh, am I going to be represented in a way that everyone's going to think this about me? Again, I don't think it's necessarily the case of Seton Hill, just in general with religious schools. If you were to go to Notre Dame or something where people go, I know that's a Catholic school. I wonder how people would feel about that if that's not their religion, and maybe there are a lot of people out there who it just doesn't matter to that much, right? I wonder if maybe for those who, if you were raised in some religion, maybe you're raised Christian but not Catholic, if it's just kind of less of a question, they wouldn't really think of it. Whereas for me, it seems a bit more foreign because I'm not somebody who's ever practiced the idea of like, I wonder what that would be like. I really don't know. I don't know what the experience of going to a religious school would be like. So it's just a question that I'm kind of curious to at the moment. And I wonder for those of you who are not, of what that investigation would look like for you in terms of the college experience. Okay, and let's just wrap here with a bit of a longer takeaway where we wrap the interview with that same shout out and love to all of the secondary theater teachers out there. Of course, a special shout out to the late, great Karen Cordaro, known as Mrs. C, who used to run Act One Theater School. That's the theater school that Joe and I were discussing. But I love it when our artist guests shout out their versions of the same, their Mrs. C's. You hear it a lot where they'll say, this person really was a mentor, this person meant a lot, or this person helped sort of some of my foundations. I know for me, Act One is where I found my love of acting. It's really, it fanned the flame of that love and that interest. It's where I first got the idea that I had a particular talent in it. It's also, I will say, where I met the one and only Ellen Letrick. So without that very meeting, there would be no MTCA in the form that it is, nor no podcast of this name if that hadn't happened. So shout out to Act One. And we've talked before in a bunch of our artist episodes about how special it is to have those teachers who fan that particular flame of confidence. I think that's really important. Ellen was certainly a teacher like that for me, as was Joe. Those teachers who tell you like, you could really do this and you should believe in yourself. There's something there. It's just one of those things that you just need to hear from somebody who isn't your parent. And it's especially needed in a business like this. And for a young person to have the irrational confidence to dive into this crazy profession, you need somebody who can say, you could take the leap. I think you're really good, right? But I also, what I said in the interview, I just want to kind of underline again, like, I really want to shout out those teachers who are working hard, not just to fan the flame, which again is important of confidence and students' interest in all those things, but those teachers out there who are helping to specifically curate those flames and help the student on the path toward where they need to go. You will know this at MTCA. We don't audition our students. We take students wherever they are. We deeply believe in helping students from whatever point in the process they are, whether that is a truly raw talent. We meet students who've done basically nothing, who this is the first experience they're going to have, or we will have many cases of students where their talents have developed some bad habits, maybe some misguided instruction, and where we're going to have to make some active adjustments to the foundation before we can then build on that foundation and help them toward their college path. But it is worth saying those are the minority of cases. Those a lot of bad habits or being really raw. The vast majority of cases where we meet students, we get to meet students who have already been set on the path in a really wonderful way by some excellent secondary teachers. And I just think something I was kind of realizing as I was doing this interview, it's why I brought up the question to Joe, is I think it can be a really awesome responsibility to do that. Maybe I'm becoming aware of this, especially in the world of I'm seeing the beginnings of this even further back than secondary education, as I watch some really skilled dance and music teachers who work with 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and just even what the concepts are that a 5-year-old has to learn and how vastly different that is from what a teenager works on. But especially since we really take students from the high school level, but we're really meeting them at 16, 17, 18. They're almost at the college level. And often we take them almost kind of through the college level in terms of their skill set, because again, the BFA is really a pre-professional degree. So we're going to take students sometimes to a pretty far along that skill set level. There is that beautiful in-between stage that I'm recognizing, certainly between being a 6-year-old and being a 16-year-old, right? But that interesting secondary phase where you are able to help kind of develop good instincts and good habits and good taste at a foundational level when it's not it doesn't matter yet. It's not on. You're not getting tested for it, right? It really is so helpful when those secondary teachers are excellent, and it makes for a 17, 18-year-old who is really ahead of the game. And again, we see it all. It is not like you're screwed if you arrive to us at MTCA with a few bad habits. Most people have a few bad habits, or even to college with a few bad habits. Or again, if you arrive to us or to college really raw, that happens too, right? But I just guess I'm giving a shout out to, I'm grateful to those, and for me especially, I'm grateful to the capable teachers that I had helping me at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, so that I was ready for this process at the level that I was. I was ready to teach by 17, 18 years old in a way that I never would have been if I didn't have those great instincts, I think, kind of put into me 12, 13, 14, 15. It took that really smart Act 1 teacher to say, hey, no, that's good. What you're doing there, something good is in there, right? Keep going in that direction, and then being specific about what is that direction of something that you're onto, when you're on the right track, to have someone to do that. And then of course, to help you adjust when maybe you're not on the right track. Hey, this maybe is getting in your way. What if we let this go, right? Acting, and it's really true of art in general, but acting is a really vulnerable practice that when you're opening up for the first time and you're trying something new, you're trying to step into something that is foreign to you, to have someone who can really respect that practice, to be able to say, keep going with that specific thing, especially when it's keep going with those kind of risks. And especially when it's a vulnerable thing, to have a room of human beings that you're able to say, hey, we're here supporting you. If you did something extraordinary and funny, we're laughing with you, not laughing at you. It's a really magical thing that I kind of wish for all of you. And especially I wish for our teenagers now, where that vulnerability, I think, can be a little harder for them to access. I think especially in the era of TikTok and YouTube, and young people getting more of their ideas of what is good and bad from this almost pre-prepared and I think pretty unrealistic medium. Even the raw stuff they see is not normally actually raw, right? They're not seeing what is actually someone's first attempt, or you might see something that's quote unquote raw, but it's pre-filtered raw, right? Just what the magic is of being able to have those live experiences where you can try stuff, you can be messy, you can be bad for a bit, and then you can stumble on some kernels of a few things that are kind of good, and just how invaluable that is to have somebody be able to go, let me sift that out for you. That was really good. Keep going in that direction. When you can have that as a young actor, I think it's really special. So of course, whether that happens at 13, whether it happens at 17 or 35, right? That can happen at any point in acting training. They're really huge moments when it happens, but it is really nice when it happens young, especially because I think it can embed in you in a different way before we harden up as much, right? So shout out to Act 1, shout out to all those great schools out there that are teaching young artists and developing those young humans. And I did want to say, I love that Joe talked about the humans and not just the performers. He talked about the lawyers and the doctors and all those other things too. We've said it many times on the pod, but it is absolutely true for us how proud we are of all of the different MTCA alumni who are succeeding in the world. And that's not just the people succeeding in our industry, right? In the past 36 hours, I've just heard about 2 recent MTCA alumni who are about to make their Broadway debuts. Like one's in a play and one's in a musical, and it happened just in these past 36 hours. We were all sending the sort of links around. We're getting so excited. But in those same 36 hours, I heard from an alum who's a successful lawyer who I still keep in touch with, who I love. I just finished chatting with an alum who's working for us now, who builds software systems for a living. It's amazing technical brain, but also is using this artistic ability that she fostered in school to be able to help us in that way. And then another alum who's right out of school who wants to do some administrative work for us and was kind of catching me up on her life. And I'm as proud of the latter 3 of those people as I am of the former 2. I'm proud of all of them, right? Truly. I think I deeply believe that like the work we do at MTCA is about investing in these human beings and happy, successful human beings, many of which hopefully will have art as a big part of their lives. But whether or not they have art and acting and performing as part of their lives, I really hope they'll take value in the work that we do. And I think there is value in this work for basically everybody. All right, I've begun waxing philosophical and poetical. So let's wrap there on another episode of Mapping the College Audition, produced by Meghan Cordier and Kelly Prendergast, with social media work by Jordan Rice. Please like and subscribe where you listen. Write us a rating and review if you want to wax poetical on your appreciation for MTCA or for Act 1, I guess, if you want to do that. You can leave it on our podcast. I don't care. And check us out at Mapping the College Audition for those fun bite-sized clips on this process. We just posted one of those bite-sized clips on one of my favorite audition stories we've told on the podcast, MTCA's own Marcus Crawford Guy talking about his Juilliard audition. And as always, check us out at mtca.com for information on your upcoming Meet MTCA workshops, as well as all things individual college prep for you. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, please trust that you're enough for the right school exactly as you are right now. Now keep striving. We'll catch you next week.